Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for thanks for willing to do this.
Well, yeah, and certainly thank you for your patience and letting me get back to you. It's got a lot of things coming in at any given moment, and so sometimes things fall through the cracks, and especially when it comes to the interview stuff, I'm always like, I'll process that later. Think about that later. Right now, I need to focus on hitting my Monday deadline.
Yeah. So I could just jump around then with your career so far.
Yeah, sure. I my recollection from what I've seen of some of the other ones you've done is you tend to be fairly rapid fire, right? I know you're sort of, you hit like topics left and right all over the place. So I'm ready. Maybe we'll see.
Well, in terms of anime or like professional voiceover, was it with the Holy Night at start?
Ooh, you do your research. Wow, was that my very first show? I think that was. I was cast by Melanie Ehrlich, sorry. And that was done through Media Blasters. And I played Shigeyuki Yanagita, I believe, right? I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, first role was a dude, and it was just this pervy, weird photographer taking photos of technically children.
Mhm.
The character, I think, was like 1,000 years old, as is normal. But like, you know, as an actor, when you're doing your script analysis and you're looking through the scene, the thought inevitably crosses your mind that he doesn't know that.
Mhm.
She might be 1,000 years old, but from his perspective, no, he's actually taking photos of children on a playground.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a very interesting production. Actually, funny story. I'm not sure if you've have you had many conversations about the Media Blasters experience?
Well, I know Holy Night was also Amber Lee Connor's first anime, and I had her a little while ago, but she didn't detail about it.
They share a building. The studio is fantastic. They actually share a building, and depending on the entrance you go in, you go through this factory with like chains hanging from the ceiling and plastic lining the walls. It seems like the place where like brutal interrogations happen. You're walking through like sheets of clear plastic that you have to pick your way through. And the chains, it's very reminiscent of like Ridley Scott, where like they always mysteriously have chains hanging from the ceiling just because it makes the atmosphere creepier. And then you go through the door and you're in a regular, I'm sorry, can we curse or no?
Yeah, it's fine.
You're in a regular ass anime studio after that, the moment you walk in the door. And I think there's another way you can get in, but if you go in the door I went in, you are very uncertain that you're in the right place until you get through that back door.
Yeah, that's weird.
Did someone trick me? Did they know I'm interested in anime? And they told me I was cast in a project so they could lure me out to a factory and do unspeakable things to me.
Well, did you take the dubbing easier then, or was it still difficult for you?
I guess it depends on how far back you look. So I grew up, my family, well, I mean, I should say my dad was in theater his entire life. He's a technical director and stage manager. He's always been behind the scenes. So I grew up on stages. I spent my childhood crawling around and exploring New York City stages that he would be working on. Sure enough, I took to acting. So I was in, I would say between like 3rd and 5th grade, I did not understand what theater was about because we would do a show at school where, they'd bring in like the art teacher to direct a play, and they would just assign people at random, and I would be like a tree and they would tell me where to stand. And I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. Like, they're just pointing and clicking and telling me I need to stand in a corner for an hour and a half. This is horrible. Why would anybody do this? But I ended up at an art summer camp. I got my BFA in drama from NYU. So I continued that through university. And somewhere along the way, I want to say it was Otakon 2004. I was on a panel right around the time I think they were starting Adventures in Voice Acting, which is a voice acting workshop series that is done through Bang Zoom, and Tony Oliver teaches it.
Yeah, I know that your X cosplay.
Yeah, what?
You dress up as this character in X.
Have you heard that story? Or have you seen that? If you've seen that, we tell nobody that. So I think I was in one of their early classes when he came out to New York, and so arrogant, hubristic me thought, well, I'm getting my degree in drama. I've been on stages half my life, so surely this will be easy. And it kicked my ass. Very hard, very challenging. And one of the things that I think a lot of people when they're first getting started, especially if they have a background in other artistic mediums, is that, or I should, other performative mediums, is that, you get in and the mic is right here, and your natural inclination most of the time is to lower your voice and be a little bit more intimate. Funny story, I've been playing largely roles that do that lately, because I think we've seen some changes in a lot of the shows that are coming in, and now it's feeling more acceptable to give more of a film read, more of that like medium shot to close up, softer, more connected read. But at the time, a lot of stuff, the general training was you'd use your theater training and speak up and project and be loud and clear. And it's very counterintuitive when you have something right in your face. So that definitely threw me off. I would say, by the time I was in Holy Night, the technique wasn't the issue for me. I think it was still being able to fully realize the character in the moment. I come from a theater background. A lot of my training is in Meisner. And so a lot of our scene work involves repetition and working the script and going through the lines over and over and over again until they are meaningless and second nature and committed to memory. And then you get on stage and you discover them again for the first time, and you explore the scene like it's brand new, and you make discoveries as you go. And as I'm sure you've heard before in only like 1,000 interviews, you get into voiceover and you've got 30 seconds to decide what you're doing. And that can be a very jarring experience for someone who's used to doing, careful script analysis and scene work. So I think a lot of my early stuff, oh my goodness, I was flying by the seat of my pants. I go back and listen to it and it just horrifies me. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, it definitely was an adjustment. I'm no stranger to acting, but I've definitely found I would hope that most actors can say this, but I definitely have found that as I've continued to build experience and do more work, I find myself being able to find that subtext and that nuance faster and be able to make more layered decisions in less amount of time, so that hopefully the stuff that's going to screen is compelling, certainly more compelling than, my Joker in Rio Rainbow Gate.
Yeah. Aren't you in SAG then, or no?
I am currently eligible.
Okay.
I live in a right to work state, which right now it won't be the case, if I go back to New York, if I end up in LA, but that means that they can't officially force you to join the union. And the truth is, at the end of the day, it's about what works best for you. And there are a lot of protections and there's a lot of value in projects being union. We make a much better rate. We're taken care of better. You have access to, earning your way to healthcare. They make sure that things are being done safely and that we're not being overworked or asked to do things that are not okay. But, at the end of the day, when you're living in a right to work state, it's kind of an interesting calculation, because a lot of the work that we have comes from non-union. And so being officially part of the union technically means that you are following Global Rule 1, and that means that you shouldn't be working on non-union things, which, by the way, is one of the reasons you'll often, I say often because there are exceptions, but why you'll often see actors that used to be very frequently in anime, like your Crispin Freemans and Travis Willingham and Laura Bailey's, are now sort of not in anime, but you start to see them in a lot of other things like your video games and, Netflix animations and stuff, is because, as we lean into union, we sort of lean away from non-union. One, it pays a fraction, but two, it doesn't have those protections in place. But, while you're living in a state where no one's going to make you join, there's kind of no rush, because the fees to join are like $3,000. I think it's a little less if you're in Texas, but that's a huge cost. That's going to be a very slow return on investment unless you're regularly booking constantly and booking big projects. And so it's for me, it's really just a matter of the finances. Here's the thing though, I've worked on a number of union projects. If I were in LA, I would have been must join and would have been in the union ages ago. So if and when I do move, I probably have to join the union like the moment I step off the plane.
Yeah.
So I'm also mentally preparing myself for that, because it's kind of one of your, like, you're thinking about the move and you're thinking, okay, well, I'll need first month, last month security for an apartment. So that's going to be a handful of thousands of dollars. I'm going to probably need to invest in a booth. That's another couple $1,000s. They're going to make me join the union immediately. Do I have, $10,000 to $15,000 in my bank account right now? I don't think so. We'll figure out how to make that happen one way or another. But yeah, all of that is on my mind right now. Well, and that's another thing that you're weighing back and forth. Because on one hand, are there other opportunities that might appear in a market going to LA? Probably. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, if you can make it work, if you're one of those people that can be finding regular union work from a right to work state, I mean, with peace and love to SAG-AFTRA, that's a great deal. And I understand why a lot of people do that.
Mm-hmm. So this was going back to the timeline, was World War Blue also pretty early?
Where did I record that? It must have been. I think I did record that at Media Blasters as well.
Okay.
Not every Media Blasters project happened in that building, because at a certain point, we moved down here. You may or may not know, but for about 3 years, I was living with Matt Shipman and Brittany Lotta. Yeah. Brittany Lotta being, the chief director with Media Blasters. And so I think by the time sorry if I'm leapfrogging other questions you might have lined up, but I think by the time we were working on I Know Kusabi, that was done down here. And a lot of it was done remotely. But I want to say World War Blue was done up there. Mm-hmm. I played, see, that one is not fresh in my mind. I played a fighter woman in that, didn't I? Oh, what was her name? T-Vite, who was based on a Street Fighter character. It's roles like that where you really appreciate the minimums, where you get paid for your hour, regardless of what you come in to do. Because I think I said like 3 words in that show.
Yeah.
That was still in a place where I was very much finding my female deliveries. I was, my wheelhouse has always been young guys, which you would not know from my resume. You might know from how often I, complain about it on Twitter, but that was always the stuff that I came up doing, just because, I know I've got a voice in the lower range. I've got a crunchy voice. When I yell, it's a very, masculine, young, crunchy sound. And so I look at your Nancy Cartwrights and your and your Colleen Clinkenbeards and the women playing, boys in anime. And that was something that I leaned into. So early on in workshops, I would always be, you'd leaf through the samples that they had, and I would definitely be picking up like Simone from Gurren Lagann, and I would grab Naruto, and I'd grab like all of those types of characters. Weird how by the time I got down here to actually start putting my career together, everyone wants to hear me voice these older, tougher women. Right. And a lot of that's just been experimentation and discovery. It's because you never know why you may or may not be booking something. And so I would be reading for boy roles, and if nothing was landing, I'm starting to think about what else I can do. And I've got this stronger, tougher voice. And I know it's a little androgynous, but like, who falls into that tough range? And so I'm thinking about, Zelda Williams, and I'm thinking about Stephanie Young and Colleen and towards the deeper, more textured range, I'm thinking about Wendy Powell. And so I'm studying their performances and starting to try to model aspects of my work after them. And sure enough, some of that started to stick. So a lot of my anime roles early on are these older, tougher women or fighters, or the big butch characters like like Venus and Haki Hoshinengi, with probably the first meaningful booking for me, because it fell outside of that, being my 2 early big ones, being Catella and Demaria Yesta. Catella because it was, finally a male archetype that I could play that let me really explore, all of the different aspects of heightened emotion, and Demaria because it was the first young female character I booked, and that had felt impossible for like the first year I was down here.
Yeah. How'd you approach a character like Aegon then?
I went in for the session. Brittany said that she had that role in mind for me. And the first fascinating thing about it is you barely see, I think it's like from here down, you barely see the character's face because they're wearing this giant scarf. And they had this softer, I want to say in the Japanese, they had this softer, somewhat feminine sound, but it was a little ambiguous. I wish I could say I did a lot of preparation and figuring out for that role, but I think it was like the first thing I threw Brittany. I want to say I went in. They said, we're going to play this character. I think I said, what are you thinking about? What do you imagine them sounding like? And Brittany just said, I don't know, give me something. And God, do I remember what that character sounded like? I think it was just kind of like this higher, softer thing, something in that range. I'd have to go back and listen to it. But I just kind of threw out this higher, softer, sort of innocent character voice. I don't even know if I'm in the range right now. And Brittany was like, great. And we went with that. Oh man, we had a nightmare line in that show. And I think it was because it was see, it's funny because the three of us are from New York. Matt wrote it, Brittany directed it, and I was the character. And we're all from New York, but I don't feel like it's a New York regionalism. But the first thing I remember throwing me off was, I want to say, I used the phrase do what, which is very common down here. A lot of people down here say do what as a way of saying like, excuse me. Mm-hmm. And that blew my mind and broke my brain. And I remember we were circling this line for like an hour, not being able to find a delivery that made sense. I think we were speaking past each other. I want to say that the director had a vision that I wasn't understanding, and I had an idea that the director wasn't latching onto. And we kept just circling each other, going like, oh, I think that was too aggressive. Can we try it like this? Well, now that sounds a little bit too innocent. So go for innocent. Now that sounds scared. I try on scared. That sounds aggressive. And we're going in circles for like an hour and a half. And then we finally lock something in. And then a week later, I get a pickup and I get brought back in. This is with all peace and love to Brittany, because I think the finished product sounded amazing. And her work on that show is phenomenal. That particular line is very funny to me looking back, because then I came back a week later for another half hour of trying to get that line. I felt so embarrassed at the end of that, because as an actor, you place everything on yourself. So I've just felt like I had failed at my craft. We were now up to 2 hours trying to say one line. And the funniest thing to me looking back, hey, Brittany, I don't know how you feel about it, or Matt, but looking back, I watched that episode and I thought it sounded great. Wherever we landed, I loved how it sounded. The experience to get there was momentarily a nightmare.
Yeah.
What a cutie character though. And actually in the script, the inside joke of that, because we talk about flaps and the moving mouth of the character and how we write for that. That's what I do as well. I also write for anime. And so our joke was that that character had scarf flaps. You couldn't see the mouth, but the scarf was moving in such a way that you kind of still had timing you could follow to write the lines for the character.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, on the topic of script adaptation, with Nagatoro, were you getting correspondence from Julie Madalena about it?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
Very little, actually. One of my biggest regrets from that show is that we didn't have weekly production meetings, which I don't think anyone does. So at least not now in remote. So I don't think that I was missing out on something that normally happens.
Okay.
I did hear through the pipeline, and if Julie ever checks this out, I hope I'm right. If not, we can talk. But I heard through the pipeline that she loved the work that I was doing on that, and that makes me relieved, because I took a lot of liberties with that show. I was very adventurous in the way that I wrote that. It was a heavy adaptation, and mileage may vary. Not every show that is recorded through that particular studio, more often than not, we stick very close to the translation. And I took a lot of liberties with that show. Unfortunately, the client was on board. They liked what I was doing. I completely redesigned the Yoshi character from what she was in the manga, but the fans seem to like it. And that makes me very happy, because you're always worried that people are going to, if you change it too much. And the biggest change was Yoshi. I was just bracing myself for people to be very angry, but they liked it. And you know what, to the show's credit, it sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, and I guess it is a little bit. It's not, I'm not trying to brag about it, but I've written shows where, it goes to air and it's so different from what you wrote. And that can happen for a number of reasons. Sometimes, more often than not, if we're doing our job right, it's not going to be too long or too short, because we're writing properly and we know what we're doing. But, actors come in, some actors speak slower than others. Some actors speak quicker than others. I speak very quick. It's a toss up sometimes, sometimes you'll be in a session and the director will want you to slow down or speed up to try to make the line. But other times, if you're a mile off because the actor just speaks naturally more quickly, it can be easier to rewrite the line to match what the actor is comfortable with.
Mhm.
And so sometimes it's just that, it's just making it work for the actors so that I don't take it too personally if something goes to air and it's very different from the words I had on the page. I might reach out and say, hey, do you have feedback for me? Like, are you hating my lines? But more often than not, it's like, nah, so-and-so speaks very quick. So-and-so is very slow. We're just, rewriting it to make sure that it works for them.
Mhm.
Nagatoro, my goodness, with like one or two exceptions, it's verbatim what was on the page, which I take as very, very high praise. And it's been a really interesting experience. That show has been very rewarding to me. You or other people might, can tell me, I don't see a lot of writers getting tagged as often as I feel like I've been getting tagged lately. And maybe that's because I'm louder about the stuff I'm writing. I think a lot of people who are writing are also actors. And so they tend to push their acting career, first. And then once in a while, like Marin Miller, Kristen McGuire, I'll see people post things about things that they're writing. It was such a popular show, or such a popular manga that then became such a popular show that there was definitely a part of me that, like I said, with the Yoshi thing, was ready to get a lot of backlash over it because
Mhm.
I'm sure on some level it's probably counterintuitive to take something that's really popular and start changing it. But that's what we do when we adapt. We want to make it make sense in English and to an American audience, and especially with a comedy. All that comedy is going to fall flat if you're just translating the translation. It's going to be stilted. It's going to be weird. And so there are a lot of times where you kind of have to reinvent a joke to make it work in English. But I was still absolutely bracing myself potentially for backlash because people, get passionate about the shows they care about. And a lot of people cared about Nagatoro. So I kind of said this before, but it's been a wild blessing to see, at least from what I can tell, just above and beyond the majority of the fans watching the show seem really, really, really into it. They're loving Kimberly and Eric's work, and they seem to be loving my words. I think once or twice I'll see something on a YouTube video or a Twitter post where someone will come in who's particularly cranky about it. You'll get those people that are like, I watched for 4 seconds and then I realized it was a dub, so I closed it.
Yeah.
And it warms my heart to see a ton of fans then coming to our defense and being like, what? You're crazy. This dub is awesome. And I'm like, yes, mission accomplished. We did it, guys.
Yeah. Well, for me personally, I thought it was cool seeing Julie directed because I don't think a lot of the modern generation is familiar with her anime work in the past, like Magic Knight Ray Earth and Ghost in the Shell and a lot of stuff like that.
And from what I can tell, it seems like she had a blast directing this, and she did a great job with it. I mean, there's always a weird conversation between where the acting meets the directing meets the writing, but for whatever reason, the alchemy that went into the show has been great. It's the finished product has continued to wow me. I'm very proud of that show. I very much hope they bring me back for season 2.
So with characters, what do you think is the case where you've had to get the darkest emotional headspace for?
Thus far, Misuzu Kawazawa in Assault Lily. Oh boy, that was a process of discovery because I've only in every other episode, and we had so many questions going into it. I'm how do I not spoil this? They're going to be minor spoilers in this, because you don't know what's going on with her or what her story is or what her background is and what her relationship is to Yu. And Lindsay Seidel did such a great job with Yu in that show. But when you first meet me in that show, I'm very Misuzu is very encouraging and is like a big sister and is very almost motherly in the way that she takes care of Yu and looks after her and helps her reframe, you know, some of her negative cognitions, so that she can feel better about herself. And you get these little hints here or there where I would challenge Lindsay and throw her, you know, a contrary idea, like, oh, sure, yeah, that's what you think. Well, here's what I see as the outcome of that. Now, don't you feel silly? And so you get a little bit of antagonism from the character. But then towards the end, man, so many questions came up. We get this flashback. We start to get flashbacks. I'm just going to spoil this. We start to get flashbacks like in episode 10 or 11, where you realize that Misuzu has been incredibly jaded the whole time and is asking questions about whether we're actually on the right side of this war. And she's expressing sympathy for the enemy that we've started to understand, you know, that we've understood the whole time to be just this blanket, black and white, objective evil. Mm-hmm. And so you see her questioning that. And then we get these poignant moments where, you know, Yu will express doubt or concern. And so rather than engage her on it, Misuzu kind of just says, you know what, forget I said anything, which is very disconcerting, because it means that whatever she's actually thinking, what she's feeling, she's not willing, she maybe doesn't trust Yu enough to share that. Mm-hmm. And then we start to see flashbacks. You know, we get a flashback of her being very possessive and very codependent, where you start to get a sense that she's feels this kind of almost toxic attachment to Yu in the way that and all of this is expressed in such a small amount of time, but you see her be very possessive and very sort of toxically attached to her. Mm-hmm. And you get a sense that in a very codependent way, she's hinging her emotional well-being. This is all the work that I did on it, hinging her emotional well-being on Yu's attachment to her, you know, that she needs Yu in her life or she might self-destruct. And then there's this whole added layer where you realize that her power involves basically rewriting memories, and it throws into question, you know, and we don't have answers to this yet. It throws into question, you know, did she die? Is she alive? How'd she die? Whose fault was it really? Is anything we've been seen so far the truth, you know, been shown so far the truth? And at the end of the toxic codependent flashback, she uses her power, which then makes you wonder if she's been like Men in Black style scrambling Yu constantly to the point where who knows what's real. And the only glimpse we've had into the real Misuzu were these two momentary flashbacks where where you get a sense that she might be, and I'm going to skip a whole bunch of things right now, where she might be sympathizing with the enemy. She might have latent feelings for Yu. I got a sense that she might be closeted and might not be comfortable with her own sexuality, but she has feelings of codependency, and she has this toxic level of attachment to her. But you get it in such a small flash that you're left just screaming for more information. Mm-hmm. But as an actor, we have to flesh out that scene and at the very least in our own imagination, completely, you know, color in all the boxes and create a full, real, living, breathing human being and explore all of those feelings so that short flashback makes sense. And so in order to approach that scene, I had to come in with what I decided was, you know, these feelings of attraction and frustration, and someone who might be, and I'm headcanoning a little bit, but someone who might be closeted, who might have, you know, grown up being either afraid of or ashamed of their sexuality, as someone who might be gay, being thrust into this school where it's almost encouraged to, you know, where like sapphic tendencies are encouraged and promoted because it's kind of how the magic works. Mm-hmm. And so there could be a self-hatred and self-loathing happening. But if it's coming from a place of attraction and of a desperate need to be someone you feel like you're not allowed to be, or that you feel shamed of being, or that maybe you were raised to feel was wrong, to then be in that scene where you have the ability to control somebody and rewrite their mind, to try and build a relationship with them that's somehow fulfilling for you, but discreet enough that you can still continue to be closeted. I was playing with all of that in like that short, like 4-hour session we did. And it was friggin' hard. It's really hard to process all of that. A lot of those times you need to get out, get as far away from your booth as possible.
Yeah.
Go get some boba tea and listen to music and, watch movies and just dissociate for the rest of the night. That was very hard. That was very challenging. And I was very, very grateful for my director, Tabitha, for being there with me. That was also challenging for me. This is less about dark headspace, but that was challenging for me too, because I brand myself as someone who's got pretty masculine energy, and I don't play a lot of feminine characters. And Misuzu was close because she's very soft spoken and she's very delicate in the way that she approaches ideas with characters. And then at the very end of that scene, she has to yell, and it's the first time you hear her yell, and I had no idea what she was supposed to sound like. And I already tend to have a little bit of dysphoria with that, because I recognize that when I yell, I feel like I sound a little masculine. And so to have a character who's a high school girl, who's a feminine character, I felt like I didn't know how to raise her voice without feeling like I was leaving the character's voice and having it not feel connected. And so I started to spiral in that session because nothing felt right. And my goodness, that was a bad day to be very early on in the pandemic. They were having us engineer our own sessions, which meant that I had the control to keep stopping and going back and trying again, regardless of what was happening on the other end. So I started to just short circuit, and thank God Tabitha was there to say, and I still remember her saying, hey, tell me if I'm wrong. I feel like this is something you're having trouble getting a read on, that you are not able to calibrate this in a way that you can judge it properly. I feel like you're having a hard time assessing your work right now. And I'm like, yes, I don't know if anything is good. Is any of it good? Is it all horrible? Everything in my life has gone wrong right now. And she's like, great. I want to tell you that second take you did was really good. And I think we nailed it. So I think I understand that you're concerned about this. I understand that you're self-conscious about this aspect of your voice. I think that second take was really great, and I think we should go with that. And that is what I needed to hear in that moment. And it turned out great. But yeah, that was a very challenging moment to record. And I think I've gotten better at it. I think I've gotten more confident in my ability to walk that line and feel like, because it's so easy to decide that anime has to fit into these specific templates where every character has to sound just so. And so knowing that in the back of my mind, I get caught in this spiral thinking like, oh man, I'm not playing the character anymore. The character sounds too butch. The character sounds too crunchy, too aggro. This is not the character voice anymore. That's not how anime works. This is illegal. And sure enough, the more I've done this, the more I've realized that I think a lot of that is, inside our own heads. With very few exceptions, I feel like the fans more often than not love variety and love hearing new and interesting voices. And so if I'm self-conscious about the fact that I can play a high school girl who, when she shouts, gets a little crunchy in her voice, that's a self-consciousness that I'm having. But then, it goes out there and the fans reassure me that they think it sounds great and that they like that it sounds different. And that's really reassuring because, when you're just alone in your booth, it's very easy to get caught up in that spiral of, feeling like anime is this thing where everyone sounds the same. And so if you don't sound the same, you don't get to play.
Yeah. I know it's not anything close to Assault Lily in terms of depth and getting to explore, but I like what you did with Sakura and Midnight Occult too.
I loved that work. That's a good one. Was that the one you were hoping I would say? Excuse me. I'll keep this brief. That was a good one. I got to play opposite Jeremy Inman, who was the villain in that episode, and Stephen Fu, who, what a great episode for Stephen as well, because that character was kind of, a tertiary character throughout the series. So to get to kind of take center stage for his own episode, that was really fun. I had a lot of fun with that. Who Natalie Rose directed me on that.
Oh yeah.
Hoover, Natalie Rose. And it was a great honor to have her bring me in for that, because she said she thought of me because she knows that I can play male and female characters. And so she wanted to cast a character that got to do both. Yeah, that was a very touching episode. I'm glad that you saw it. I wish more eyes had been on it. I feel like when it aired, because it was so detached from the rest of the series, I feel like not enough people got to see it. So I would love it if more people go and watch the OVAs for Midnight Occult. They're good. Yeah, there's a reason that's still on my visual reel. I haven't made a visual reel in a while, but I've still continued to have that even as I switch other clips around. I love that character. I think that's also, man, between that and Misuzu, that might be the most feminine character I've played, just because I often lean into my texture a little bit. And that character had a very soft, very, you know, I don't even know if I could reproduce it now, but that character had a very soft, very smooth sound that I don't do very often, but for some reason or other, we found it in there and I liked it. I'm very happy with how that came out.
Well, and even in a comedic show like Sleepy Princess, you get to play a really cool, mysterious.
Do I?
Kind of.
I've said this in interviews before, so I'm sorry if this is beating a dead horse. It was very fun to be a part of that show. I actually, I proofed that show. So I did, it's called final scripting, where you're basically you're just proofing the scripts because they want to make sure that the captions actually match what's being said on screen. So the last thing that you do is you go through and you watch the final recorded episode and you update the script so it's exactly what's said. Which is good because, you know, then it means that the captions aren't completely wrong, as we've seen sometimes. So that was a very fun show and a very funny show and a very clever show. I guess I'm very proud of the work I did as the Sand Dragon. Because I like playing creatures. It's fun. It's taxing on your chords, but it is a lot of fun. That show is just forever funny to me because because contextually, Waker is one of the central heroes, but doesn't say anything. So you go to websites and it's like in bold, like it's one of the leading roles. And I'm like, I had no lines. How is this real? Is this real life? Very fun show to be a part of. I wish I'd been able to do more in it because it's still very funny to me that I'm listed as playing a lead in that role when, like, I think I gasped 3 times, and that was the extent of my work with that character. I worked with Amber on that though, and I like working with Amber. Amber's a great director. I just worked with Amber recently on what was it called, on that vampire game. My character isn't announced yet, but I announced that I was working on it. V Rising. I am not, my roles aren't officially announced yet, but it's coming soon. I think it's still in beta, possibly. V Rising is a fun little top-down, seems very almost Diablo-like game, but you're playing as the vampire. So all the villains are like the heroes. So like you're fighting against like paladins and knights who are trying to take you down. And I did work on that, and Amber directed me on that too, which was great. I like working with Amber.
I know you got to do some crazy memorable shit in JoJo too.
Man, that came out of nowhere. Very happy with working with that. You know what? I think I said this in the tweet, but I got to work with Tony Oliver on that as a director, and he was my first foray, like 15, 18, some stupid amount of years ago, into voiceover. He was the one teaching that class that I utterly bombed when I was just coming over as like a theater student, you know, hoping anime would be easy. And somehow, you know, it took 15 plus years for us to finally work together. So it was about time when we actually did that. He's been in my corner a long time. I look at Tony as one of my mentors. And right from the start, even back then, he was encouraging me to move to LA. It's funny that I still haven't managed to pull that off, hopefully in the near future. But he's been encouraging me to move to LA for as long as I've known him. And one of the things that you know, and hopefully he doesn't look back on this with frustration, but one of the things that I valued him the most for is the fact that he's been patient with me, because I went through a 10-year career where I was just fixing computers for a living. And at some points along the way, I absolutely made the decision that I was not an actor anymore. You know, I kind of hit that moment of denial where I'm like, this is fine. I'll try to go for management, you know, at this tech company, and it'll be fine. I don't need to act, right? And of course, my heart caught up with me, and I realized I had to do this, that it was the one thing that I've wanted to do forever. So, you know, that feeling didn't last. But, you know, every once in a while, Tony would come out to New York and he would teach a workshop. And there was a point at which, like, I didn't need that workshop anymore. But he would still reach out when he was in town, and I would, you know, call him back and we would get dinner.
Oh,
for
yeah.
a number of years, even when I wasn't taking the class and and that's what meant the most to me, that human connection side of it, because, you have limited interactions with someone, and this was one of those experiences where I could tell that it wasn't transactional, and that in fact, he's become a very dear, close friend of mine, that, even when I wasn't giving him and the studio money, that he really believed in my ability to be a part of this industry and to contribute value to it. That, years later, man, we're talking like 5-6 years, I have done nothing. I've made no effort to have an acting career, and he would still meet me for dinner in New York. And then he met me again once I'd moved down here, and that was really great. We had dinner down here when he was here for a convention, and he never wavered from expressing support for me and encouragement, and reassurance that he thinks that there's something that I can bring to the medium, and just continuing to like patiently encourage me to please get your ass out to LA and actually try this. Please try this.
Yeah.
He means the world to me. He's a busy guy. He's really hard to get in touch with. That's my only feedback. Please answer my texts sometimes, Tony. But he's been very steadfast, and I love him to death. That was a great show. My goodness. Oh, I got to be in a JoJo show. I want to be in it again. I want to play a named character in one of these series, because that's a really fun show to be a part of. But getting to kind of like come out the gate with my first Bang Zoom show being a JoJo show is wild. Plus, low key, I have a lot of friends that love that show, and I'm not talking about voice actors and anime. I mean, anime fans, yes, but I'm not talking about, my friends in the voice acting community. I have friends on Discord, people I play video games with, who, do visual design and work in tech, and are just, people with other careers that are not in my industry. And they all adore JoJo's. So there was nothing more exciting than being able to let like my core friend group know that I was about to be in the show that they obsess over. And thankfully they didn't hate it.
Yeah. I have another curveball role that one of my favorites of yours that I
hit me
talk about.
Yeah, Camilla.
Yeah.
Camilla, well, you probably know this too, then, because you seem to do excellent research, and I'm just astounded at the level of preparation you have for this.
Thank you.
my first booking down here, didn't even audition for it. I think actually, I'd auditioned for Marissa for Lenti maybe 6 or 7 times over the course of like 2 or 3 years from New York. Never booked anything. And then out of nowhere, when I got down here, a couple months into living down here in Texas, I still had no connections. I think I'd done one class with Sunny Straight. I did a class with Chris Rager, who's a close friend of mine now. And then, no ins at Funimation yet. I hadn't met Joel. Joel McDonald was the first session that I booked at Funimation, brought me in for One Piece Walla. And then out of nowhere, I got an email from Soundkitten saying that they had a role for me in this show. They wouldn't tell me what it was. So, I spent that week watching through all of the episodes, trying to guess which one it would be. I knew it was a remake. So immediately my thought was like, did they get Wendy back or not? They wouldn't have me come in and play Wendy's character, right? They would just have me play Wendy, or they would just have Wendy come back and do it again, right? Who would I be playing in this? Am I playing the older mentor character? I don't know. She sounds a little younger than I would probably lean towards. And then sure enough, it's Camilla. And my God, that session was hard. It's funny that I'm playing I think I was out of practice. I got so used to playing female archetypes that I was not used to playing male archetypes. And it's funny that I'm now playing Buckingham in Requiem the Rose King.
Right.
And we're about to go in the second core. And in the second core, Buckingham ages up and becomes an adult. And I am not being recast, unlike the Japanese cast. I pray we can pull it off. I have high hopes. I'm scared. But it had been a while since I had done a male archetype when I did Camilla. And my God, that session, the whole session was Lenti saying, can you go lower? We need it to be a little bit lower. We need to be a little bit lower. Can it be as low as possible? Can you get to the bottom of your possible range? We need to deliver it down there. Everything was just this low, soft. And now we're going to go into upward facing dog. And now we're going to transition into downward dog. And now you're going to breathe the poison from my flowers and slowly wither away. Yeah, that was very fun. I was very flattered to be considered for that role, having not auditioned for it. It was a hard session. I'm glad that it turned out well, though.
Do you still have a lot of affinity with Demaria too?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, probably still one of the most meaningful roles I've booked. I feel bad because for one reason or another, you never know what roles are the right fit. And you know that actors don't book like 99% of what we read for. For one reason or another, I have not gotten to work with Kyle again since that. That was actually like years ago. That was like the last time Kyle Phillips, the director, and I worked together. But that was a lot of fun. It was incredibly meaningful for me to book Demaria because Demaria was a young female character. And that was the first time I got to play a young female character in a show and prove to myself and prove to the fans and the fans proved to me by accepting and loving the character that you can have female roles that have lower, huskier voices and people will love it. It's often an uphill battle that people don't think that that's possible. Whether or not they say it, whether or not they think they believe it, there are a lot of examples of, for one reason or another, casting directors and directors feeling like, or at least demonstrating that if a character is young, they have to have a higher voice. And if the character has a lower voice, they have to be an older character. And yet here's Demaria being a younger character with a lower voice. And you can just scroll through all of the people that love how that character came out and loved how that character sounded. And, paranoid me expects to go find a YouTube video of the dub and, and just read through comments of people being like, oh man, why does she sound like a dude? But instead, everyone's like, why is this character so sexy? Can I hear more of this character? And I'm like, oh my goodness, they actually liked it. And it was one of my first recurring characters. My first two roles were Catella and Dragon Ball Super. Not my first two, but my first two significant roles were Catella and Dragon Ball Super and Demaria. And so being able to almost simultaneously demonstrate that I could, carry a significant portion of the plot in a male vocal range and in a female vocal range was very validating to me. It's interesting. I have two very mixed feelings about, the ultimate outcome of that role. And I've said this in interviews before, but that was a huge learning experience for me because it was the first time that I was brought in regularly for sessions in the show and wasn't just coming in, for a one-off to do background characters. And so I was rusty and there was a lot I didn't know. And there was a lot of things I wasn't comfortable with. And it was a huge learning curve. And so I feel like as I go through those episodes, I can hear the improvement episode by episode. And I listen to some of the early Demaria appearances and it makes me cringe in my soul. If you love it, great. For me, I'm so judgy about it. But as I listen through, I'm more and more proud of the performance. I'm more and more proud of the nuance we were able to find. I felt like I found the character's voice as we were going. And of course, by the time you've mastered it, the role is over and the show is gone. So on one hand, it serves as this really fascinating time capsule of me going through this trial by fire and learning the ropes as I go. And on the other hand, man, I wish I could go back and remaster that because I bet I could just slay that character if I recorded it today.
Yeah. About with it's a pretty creepy villain in Reika, Kemono Jihen.
That was another example of being told I was being brought in for something and not being told what it was going to be. And Brittany texted me and said she had this Brittany Lauda, the director, texted me and said that she had a role in mind for me that would be a real big departure from anything she'd heard me do before. And so again, I'm crawling through it, like looking at all the characters being like, which one am I going to be? Is she bringing me in to be Shiki's mother? Is she bringing me in to be Nobumaru? Is she like, I have no idea who I'm going in to play. I would be remiss if I didn't say when I first saw it was the mosquito lady. At first I was a little disappointed because I had skimmed the episode and I thought that it was just like a quick one and done character where like, okay, I guess I'll, have one or two lines with the other mosquito ladies and that'll be the end of it. And like, got my hopes up for nothing, rats. But in practice, it was really interesting. I want to say that is also one of the more feminine characters I've done. And she coached me very high. I don't usually play higher voice characters, but some of those early lines that we'll see if my voice is there right now. She had this very high, softer, like, oh my goodness, poor darling. Oh, look at you shaking. Let's get you in, get you warm and make you some tea, and just this very hyper feminine sort of motherly kind of a thing, which then made the switch as she transforms so much fun, because we were able to drop the pitch as we get that, like, I always love, because I know that my range goes that way. I love playing with, and we sort of do this in this. I do it a little bit with Jihen in Log Horizon as well.
Mhm.
I love when you can shift the voice over the course of a very short amount of time without having to use editing, without having to like pitch it down so it's like a filter. And we sort of approach that a little bit with Reika Kaga, because she gets to drop the act. So you get that, oh, you shouldn't have been here. You're going to regret coming to this facility. My sisters were this, blah, 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 blah. And you shouldn't have come in here. And now I'm going to destroy you. I love that shift so much. And so being able to play both sides of that and play, the mask of like the feminine height, like almost like this vaguely like, with weird elements of Jessica Rabbit, to then this like just dead eyes, cutthroat, darker, monstrous persona. That's really rewarding. I think any actor would love being able to play multiple facets, not just a multifaceted, emotional landscape, but being able to play vocally in so many different ranges over one role is incredibly meaningful. That's what made, to steal your next segue, that's what made Majikayo in Dragon Ball Super so meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And that's another one. I love how that came out. I bet I could still improve on it if I were to go back and do it now. I almost, not quite, but I almost love Majikayo more than Catella, even though Catella was the bigger role. And Catella, I got to tap into, there were lots of inspirations with Catella that you can go watch the performances and decide for yourself. But I drew inspiration from Peridot, from Steven Universe. I drew inspiration at moments from Billy West's work as Ren from Ren and Stimpy. I pulled a lot of inspiration in crafting some of the Catella moments. But Majikayo was so fun because Majikayo changes shape and the voice changes as he gets larger and smaller. And originally the director, Raleigh Pickens, said, his natural assumption, and I don't blame him for it, was, as we get big, maybe we'll pitch you down, or maybe we'll like add a filter that makes you sound like smaller when you got to be the smaller version of the character. And I said, please let me just try it without, like, if you hate it, by all means, do your editing magic and make me deeper or softer, but let me try to just do it naturally, because that'll be really rewarding for me. Oftentimes, if you can pull it off, it sounds better to the fans, because, edited pitching, we've all heard a million roles where they're a big character and they're clearly going through a modulator and you're like, okay. But when you hear someone do it naturally, like hearing David Sobolov do Kaido in One Piece, like when it's actually coming out of the voice box, it's so much more impactful, I feel like. Mm-hmm. And to their credit, over at Okratron, they kept it. So that was another role where I got to be, tiny little, like sort of bummed out, tiny little Majikayo, and like regular Majikayo who had almost like a little bit of like a Frieza tangential sort of texture going on. And then he gets bigger so that by the end, he's kind of down here and doing this thing. Like, and hitting that all over the course of one character. Oh my God, so much fun. So much fun getting to do that. And again, especially when you have the moments where you can do it over the course of one line. And those moments where, I don't know, did we have one of those that got to air? But when you have those where you can do the inflate and be like, and I'm making this up, this is improv, but like when you can have a character who's like, that's it. I'm going to take you down.
I'm going to take you down and you're going to be dead at the end of this.
And do that over the course of one line. That's so much fun for me.
I know it was kind of a similar thing too with Edward and Shadow's House, at least in like a couple episodes.
So, well, what's fascinating about that, and so let me make sure we're on the same page. I did not play proper Edward.
Yeah, right.
Right. But they came in to have me voice his disguised voice, which was a female / kind of androgynous, but like, a deeper female huskier delivery. And that was fun. I do not like voice matching. And so if I get an audition that says, we need someone who can perfectly sound like, Billy West, I don't really want to do that oftentimes because, even if the gig is lucrative, I tend to find that trying to model your performance too much after another actor, you're juggling too many balls and the acting can kind of get lost. Like the element of play goes away because you're spending so much time trying to carefully keep yourself in this range of what that other actor does. And so it becomes more like, it becomes more like you're delivering this pre-crafted kind of paint by numbers thing. You're not exploring, you're not discovering. And so I didn't set out to do this with Edward's female voice, but weirdly enough, over the course of recording, the director, Caitlin Glass, had the observation that we had kind of naturally found our way to a delivery that really kind of fit and matched the actor that was playing Edward. And so it was cool to, on some level, then affect a delivery that still felt like the character. And I don't know if we set out to do that, but the fact that we found our way to that was really meaningful because ultimately, it is the same character. If I'm the same person, that means that even if I'm playing the role versus if Chris Sabat is playing the role versus if Emmy Lowe or Kaylee McKee is playing the role, the character is going to think the same. They're going to have a similar speech pattern. If they have a specific dialect, that dialect is still going to be there. If they trip over or if they slur or if they have a lisp, or if they pause and emphasize specific words, that's all going to still be there. And that I felt was lost a little bit in that show. But something that made me very happy, was to discover that as we were recording Edward, like knowing that we found our way to a delivery that kind of matched the other actors. That makes me happy because then that means that as people are watching it, it's going to still sound like it's the same character with the same delivery pattern and the same way of thinking. So it's not like, oh, I guess someone else is voicing Edward this week. Those little details, I think, can be very important. Similar to when actors have to play kid versions. Like I'm sure we've all seen shows where the kid version just feels spot on and others where you're like, I do not know how you get from this voice to that character.
Yeah. So I guess is Rose King the safest thing that you can talk about that you're part of?
Yeah, I got a couple things in the pipeline that sadly I don't think will be out for about a year. But if we do this again in a year and a half, I will have some very exciting things to talk about. Latest is Requiem, and I'm very, very, very happy to be working on that show. I love that show.
Mm-hmm. Well, my final question then is always asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
What? I don't know. No questions about Requiem. I love Requiem. I will say this about Requiem, and then I'll answer your question. I'm very grateful to Sean for having me onto that show. I've been saying for a long time, I have very much wanted to play male characters, and then I feel like it's one of those things you just know in your bones that if you can get that door open and find that opportunity and have one of those characters connect, that like. The way that I think about it is like, it'll just blow the game wide open. If I can get directors thinking about me in male roles as well as female roles, I think that that's going to really change the landscape of my career and what the work I do looks like. And so to have Sean take a chance on me with a role like Buckingham is incredibly meaningful to me. I wasn't that familiar with the manga when I first started to go through it. So, I auditioned for Richard. I auditioned for Edward of Lancaster, Brandon McInnes's role, and Kieran Strange's roles. And I was so excited when I got Buckingham because I love the play. I love, I love the histories, but I love Shakespeare's work surrounding the characters. And Buckingham was always one of the most fascinating characters because he ends up as Richard's closest confidant next to Catesby. And there's a funny dichotomy there where Catesby knows how to stay in his lane and respect the power structure and the fact that he is beneath Richard and serving Richard. And Buckingham's hubris comes from the fact that he wants to see himself as an equal and a partner to Richard. And he ultimately underestimates the fact that Richard is just as willing to throw him away as anybody else. He thinks he's priceless and he's not. And that's where you get that fun, Game of Thrones shit where it's like, oh, you thought you were in on the, you thought you were in on the takeover, but now, you're going to be crushed beneath, the treads of my domination. Mm-hmm. And so as I've read it, oh my goodness, I'm so looking forward to core 2 because Buckingham really steps up. I mean, we'll have to see what the anime does, but Buckingham really steps up and becomes a core character to the plot in the second core. And oh my goodness, is heading towards such a wild ride with Richard. And the twist, which I won't spoil, but the twist they put on the way their relationship develops and what ultimately leads Buckingham down the path that he does historically, like the twist that Ayakano puts on their story is just heartbreaking and incredible. Please watch Requiem, the Rose King, and thank you for involving me in this, Sean. What do I want my legacy to be? I'm happy to be telling stories. And so I've always been someone for whom it was less about, and it has to be to a certain extent about the money that you're making, because if we can't make a living, we can't do this. But it's always for me been less about the money I was making and more about just having the opportunity to tell stories and connect with people. And then, thereby connect with fans and share, my love of this medium and of the work that we're doing with the people that watch it and that enjoy it. I'm not sure I see myself in anime forever. I think, with the kind of work that I do where I'm most comfortable, I think that I probably would be a great fit in prelay, and I might even be a better fit in video games. So, I think as long as there's a good story to tell, for me, it doesn't matter what medium it's in. I'll work in anything, because to me, it's the story that's the most important. But, if a year or two from now we're talking and I'm, and I'm in like The Last of Us 3 and God of War 12 or whatever, like, I think that's a happy place for me to be too. I will never stop loving anime, but especially as I look towards the West Coast and look towards some of the stuff that's happening out there, man, is just a world of stuff I'd love to be a part of, when it comes to American cartoons and like, DC cartoons and video games and like World of Warcraft and Overwatch. And like, I want to get into those worlds too and explore character work in those worlds. And so I think when we get to the end of this, if I've had a chance to play in all of those theaters, and you can hear me as like a major playable character in some first person game, and if I'm a raid boss in Final Fantasy 14 and if I'm the new voice of Pepe Le Pew, I don't know, the character's gone. But, like something like that, like if I can hit all those notes, that's going to be a really fulfilling life for me. At some point in the future, I'll consider stepping back on stage and I might consider doing on camera again, but I love working behind the mic. It feels so safe to me. And I love the worlds and the characters we can create regardless of what we look like, as long as there are people willing to trust our voices and look past who we are, which some directors, which more and more often directors are getting better about. I think, if we can do work where it doesn't matter what we look like, who we are, what our identity is, what the color of our skin is, and we can play characters based solely on the merit of the voice coming out of our mouth. And we've still got a little ways to go with that, but that's the world that's the most exciting for me, because then, not to mention you don't have to sit 8 hours in makeup for like a major movie, but like, you can play monsters and demons and talking clocks and you can do all of that in one day. And that's so fulfilling to me. Yeah. I don't know if that was a roundabout way of answering your questions. And this kind of feels self-serving, but I think that there's something in that too, that I want to get to a point where I'm able to play roles that are worth bringing out to conventions and to other events, because I want a chance to meet people, talk face to face, actually get to know the people that love the medium. And so, if I can get to a place in my career where I have more opportunities to get out there and actually spend time, sharing in the love of this medium with the people that watch it and love it, that's going to be really fulfilling to me too. I don't know. Is that a legacy? Maybe.
Well, thanks. I'm glad that we got to do this.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really great chatting with you, and I appreciate your patience with me as we kind of got a little bit of a late start. But I had a blast. I hope you had a blast.
Yeah.
I'm happy to come back anytime you like. This was great.
Thank you. I'll be sure to send it to you once I have it up as well.
Yeah. Thanks so much. It was great talking to you. I'll see you later.
Bye.